had a few requests recently to try and depict something with crashing waves and raging sea. Couldn't find anything in my photographs readily to hand, but I'm a member of a stock photo website where you can pay a fee and it's royalty free then, and you can use the photograph for this purpose, for teaching. And I found this, and I put crashing waves into the search engine, got this lovely photo, because not only has it got the crashing waves and the rocks and the ocean, it's got this interesting structure here, and I've written on the back, it's Salento in Italy. It's not really about where it is though, it's about the type of subject and how we tackle that in watercolour. It's something really that I would normally have associated with oil painting, where you can put lots of white in, and we've got to try and we will use a bit of white. We've got to try and have the bulk of the white as the white paper. So it's probably a bit more difficult, I think, than if you were doing it in oil. But the first thing, like any other subject, is to put a bit of masking fluid on and consider where I want to do that. Probably not much, actually. I mean, if I were to paint this structure, if I were to get all the sky in first before painting that structure, it would push that into the background. That could work well. But we would lose, inevitably, these little hints of light down there and along that edge. So maybe I'll just put a few little highlights in with the masking fluid for those, and then I'll probably do this one without a lot of masking fluid on it. So let's use the small masking fluid brush, rub it on a bit of soap, and then look at this right hand edge of this building, and it's a few little highlights down that edge there, maybe across the top of the broken down wall at that point there. Same thing, because it's the light's definitely coming from the right. It's the same thing, because the light's definitely coming from the right, it's the same thing at this side here. With a few little highlights along there. Let me think, is there anywhere else? I think I might put a little bit, there's a little structure here, and again the light catching it on that right hand side, and I think it might be worth putting a little bit on that grassy top edge there. I know that's darker than the background, but it might be worth using a bit of artistic license there and having part of it a little bit lighter than the background. Let's try it anyway. So I've got a clean number 10 brush with water on it, and I'm just going to go in there and go above that line. You can see that broken pencil line. Use the slightly larger brush this time, still rub it on some soap though. And with anything like this, of course, and you'll see me do this many a time if you've watched some of the tutorials, but you have to wet a larger area than you need. If I just wet to the top of there, when this meets the top edge of the water, it'll stop and we'll get a hard edge, which is what I'm trying to avoid. So I'm going to just come in below my pencil line and let it wander up to the pencil line. If I were to paint this along that line, it would get higher than that. Okay. The other thought I've got is that when I paint the sky, which is the first thing to do, there is this big splash there, the other side of the rock. And I could put a bit of masking fluid in for that. Or I might be better to just drop some water in there and so that it washes it out and we have a white area with all the sky behind it, almost like a cloud. I think that might be the best method. Okay. So can't do anything though while that masking fluid is still damp, so let's get that dry. masking fluid's dry. Let's get a bit of paint. We'll get the sky in first. So nice big wash, there's plenty of colour, and let's get some cobalt blue. Just cobalt blue on its own, and then some cobalt blue with ultramarine, a warmer, richer blue and a cooler, thinner blue. Okay, so I think I'll get the best effect, I think, by painting it with a flat brush. As long as I don't get lines in the sky, I'll have to watch that. I think I probably need a bit more of the cobalt and ultramarine. Okay, so that's my two shades of blue. The stronger one with cobalt blue and ultramarine, and a lighter one that's just cobalt blue. Let's have a bit of grey as well. I'll get a smaller brush, a number 10 brush, and perhaps some cobalt blue, rose madder, a little bit of light red. Yeah, that should be okay. That's just to put a touch of warm grey in the sky. There's just, if you look at the photograph, there are just a couple of wisps of cloud. It's you could manage without them really, but it'll add a little bit of interest. So I'm now taking a natural sponge, making sure it's full of clean water, and wetting the whole of the background. Come right across the ruined building there, the ruined tower, because you can, the whole idea is that has the sky colour behind it, so it really sinks into the background. You can come down here to where these rocks are, going right across the horizontal line that represents the horizon, where sea meets sky. We'll paint that in after. We'll bring the sky right down there at this stage. It's worth having a look at it sideways on. I missed a bit there. To look at that shine on the paper. Remember, any hard edges that form because you didn't wet it all are going to look a bit ugly. Okay, so I'm going to work with the 1-inch flat brush and lay the sky in across the top like that. That's it. The first wash I'm putting in is the richer blue, the cobalt blue and ultramarine, and work my way down. You know, the important thing with this is to go right off the edge of your paper onto the tape. Don't stop short of the edge. Okay, really continuing to work down. Let's get it nice and darker. Well, not dark, but darker at the top. Then I'm picking up the thinner wash of just cobalt blue. Work that in. Still working down. Below the horizon, into these rocks. I think we could get a bit stronger lower down here because I've got that I've got to wash the colour out for that crashing wave, and there won't be much colour to wash out. Okay, so getting the grey on the number 10 brush, and let's just suggest maybe a wisp of cloud across there perhaps, and there they are, quite horizontal marks to suggest the bit of cloud here. Use the tip of the brush to taper them. Yeah, that should do it really. Now I'm going to take the brush, clean it, and let's try and get that wave at the back there by just taking a bit of colour out. Now it will need developing this, but the starting point is to get rid of some blue, with a bit of white, a big splash of it really. And it's the other side of the rocks, this. It's a good halfway up, it comes quite high, it's a good halfway up the height of the tower. And what I can do to enhance that is maybe dab a bit with the tissue. Keep your finger out of the way because that's got a bit of grease or oil on it and it will mark the paper.
Okay.
And I'm going to take a little bit out there as well, like a big splash from it. So that's about right for that there. I don't want too much colour to settle here either because there's a bit of white down here. So let's. I mean, we can always come back into this, but for now, I'm just going to take a bit out and dab it with a tissue. So I haven't got too much blue behind where I want some white, and I don't have to resort too much to body colour or gouache. Yeah, I think that's a good start. So this has had overnight to dry and for me to think about it. This is a bit tricky. This mist, it's so fine, the spray there, that it's like a mist almost, and yet the spray there is much more clearly defined. So it's I can't treat that as one. It's got to be treated differently. And really, I've got to start allowing for that spray when I paint this tower in here, because that's the next job. So let's see how that goes. Well, we need some colour for that tower. Now, often when I've done something like this, as you'll have seen if you've watched quite a few of the tutorials, I would mask the whole tower and then paint it with a bright colour so the sun's shining on it. But it's not like that, it's almost silhouetted against the bright blue sky. And that's why I continue the blue right over it. But we've got to put some colour on it, and I don't want to just put a really dark browny grey or something on it. I've got to look at what's happening, and there is a bit of a sort of pink in it and a bit of purple, warm colour really. So I think we'll emphasise that. So before I mix anything, I perhaps should take the masking fluid off. What little bits of masking, and they were just so that I can preserve a few highlights as I paint that haven't got blue on them, they've got white paper behind. So you can see now already where they're going to go. Let's think about some colours. Might be a bit of trial and error this, but I think let's try to get a sort of pinky colour. And I'm going to take Naples yellow and what should we put with that? Maybe a bit of rose madder. Now that shouldn't be too thick or it'll go all cloudy and chalky because of the amount of white that is in Naples yellow. And then I think we want a bit of purple. So we've got here cobalt blue, and I'm going to put some rose madder with it. That's from the sky, I think, as well, so there's a bit of ultramarine in it as well. Now, so that it doesn't go a flat, dull grey, I'm putting maybe more rose madder in than I would normally. Now, I think we do want a greyer version of that as well, so I'm going to take that cobalt blue there, and I think that was just cobalt blue. And some rose madder in it again. Now it's either light red or burnt sienna now into that, and I think we'll go for burnt sienna. But not too much, you don't want it to go like a reddy brown, but not too much blue because you don't want it to be a cold grey. That's not bad, that's quite a warm grey. So yeah, let's see how we get on with that. What I've got to do when I paint this is make sure I don't block out all that white paper, because it's a waste of time masking it out if I do that. The other thing I need to look at is through this archway here that you can just see, it's actually a little bit lighter in there at the top, getting darker towards round the little opening and towards the top of this wall in front. So not a difficult structure, but a lot to think about. Okay, so that's a number 10 brush. That's full of the grey paint. So I'll get a smaller brush. Better in a situation like this always to start with, tell you what, let's have a bit of brightness as well. Let's have a bit of raw sienna and burnt sienna as well. I'll have that standing by. If you think things are going a little bit dark, you want to add a bit of sunshine, a bit of brightness, that's always a good standby. Raw sienna and burnt sienna. Okay, so let's try this. Let's try the pinky colour first. And this is a number... This is a number 10, so it's a number 8 brush. It's not having much effect at all. I think that could get a bit stronger. Let's put a bit more Naples yellow in it, a bit more rose madder in it. Okay, now it's very rustic and weathered, this. So no clean, neat edges. And at the moment I'm leaving the white as white paper, not putting anything on that. That will need tinting at some stage. Now here, where it gets a bit misty and with the fine sea spray, we'll just drop in some clean water. Okay. All right, let's... All right, let's try a little bit of the purple on it now. A case of building this up gradually, I think. That's still wet where I put that clean water there, so I can leave that. Yeah, okay, it's coming on, that. And I am getting that pinky colour coming through, so that's not bad. I am getting a lot of paint on it though, maybe a bit too much. I'm going to lift a little bit out. Let's try a touch of this might be a bit of artistic license, but I'm trying a touch of the raw sienna and burnt sienna in it. It can be a bit blotchy and uneven as well, to indicate that it's a bit weathered and worn. Okay, let's go for the grey now. I think I need to up the strength of that a bit. Cobalt blue, rose madder and burnt sienna. And this, I'm going to let it wander about a bit. Quite a large brush this, but it's good point on it, so I can still be quite accurate. Okay, yeah, that's not a bad colour. Let's try a touch more. Let's try a touch of blue down there. Quite like that little bit of blue that I can see on that edge. And here as well. Just a touch of cobalt blue in. Not neat, just with water. And I think I've seen a place where we want a bit more warmth, so that bit of reflected light. So I've got some more raw sienna and burnt sienna, a bit stronger this time. And let's get some reflected light into there. Okay, break it up a bit. Yep. You can let these colours work together on the paper and mix and blend. You get some interesting colours come out of it if you allow that to happen. Much more interesting than if you mix them all on the palette. Okay, now we're losing that misty shape there, so I'm going to get a really clean brush, the number 10 brush still, and let's get that misty effect back where the sea spray is. And it's not a wet brush, it's just damp. So what I do, I wet the brush, take the most of the moisture off so it's just damp, not wet through, and lift out. See how that just brings the colour out before it has a chance to dry. Yeah, obviously that needs developing a bit more. There's quite a bit of work to do on it, but I don't think that's a bad start. Got some nice colour there. If I just keep piling colour in, it'll all run to the edge and it'll settle and it'll almost be like a tide mark all the way around it. So I've got to be careful I don't overdo that. It might be worth though me getting a bit of the browny grey and just starting to, with the very fine brush, the detailer, start to get the feel of the broken stones along the edge. Just leaving the tiniest glimpse of that white coming through. And keeping my fingers off it as well. I think maybe we could go a little bit stronger down this, down the bottom here where it meets the ground. You can see looking at the photo that the tone is stronger there. Maybe it's damp creeping up. Maybe a little bit darker down this side here. Yeah, and perhaps on this edge here I'll lift a little more colour out. At the start of that archway there. I mustn't overwork that, so let's give it some drying time and then see what we've got. Okay, so that took quite a bit of drying actually because it was very wet. Now I can't really see that little archway there anymore because I've washed my pencil marks away, and this does happen. You need to keep an eye on that because you don't want to have taken the trouble to draw that and then because you've washed your pencil lines away just guess what it should be like and make a mistake. So always easily done to put your pencil marks back in. That guides as to what that actually looks like. And we'll get some, we need a bit of darker colour down in there now, so I'm getting some more of the grey, the cobalt blue, rose madder and burnt sienna. And we can get into here with this. Round the top of the arch. And then with the Naples yellow and rose madder, I'm just going to fade that out into there. Bit of clean water. Maybe a touch more grey in there. Now here we've got a bit of dark behind the arch, sort of inside the arch rather. Still leave that white there, even if you don't want that as bright as that later on, you can always darken it. You'll be glad you've got that. Okay, and then a bit of clean water just to blend it into it. See, that's forming that arch shape for us. Let's try and get the feeling of the shape of the stonework around it. Okay. Right, now the top detail here, broken up stonework and these shapes, they are silhouetted against the sky, so we can put that in with the darker grey and then just soften it out as we come down to there. I'll soften it out with a bit of dry brushwork really, that makes it look all the more authentic, maybe blend it slightly. Okay, the same applies here at this side. We've got, as long as I don't get my hand on it, we've got some little stonework details. We can soften into the rest of it. Yeah, maybe a little bit darker behind there, just float a bit more grey in there. Okay, so now let's build in a bit more detail. It's a case of just gradually building this detail up. Maybe suggestions of stonework, etc. You need a brush with a really good point on it for this. Let's try a bit of paler colour like that to suggest a bit of stonework. This is the Naples yellow and rose madder. Just suggest a few little stones with that, with the lighter colour. When you're doing this bit of work suggesting these stones like this, bear in mind that they're probably quite large chunks of stone, but at this distance they're going to be quite small. Don't do great big marks, great big lumps. It's just they're quite small and quite subtle really. And don't do every one either. It's a case of just suggesting a few here and there. Because there's that bit of opaque white in the Naples yellow, you can use it against the darker background, and it still gives you an indication, nothing too strong, just an indication of a piece of stone. Oh, that's not dry enough, that. Okay, soften that in a bit. Okay, now we'll get a bit of grey. Put a bit of texture in. I'm not going to put anything like as much detail in this as is actually visible on the photograph. I'm going to hold back from that. Let the viewer use a bit of imagination. And any gaps that you create between the stones, any suggestions of mortar, they should be tiny. It really is the point of the brush. So you can see what I'm doing here and how I'm building up the detail. It's important to make it detailed enough to look interesting, but not so detailed that you've overworked it. So I'm just going to do a few more little cracks and crevices between the stones, a few more suggestions of the stones themselves, and I'll see you when I've completed that. Okay, so I think that's enough detailing. You could look at that and go on forever adding more detail, but no, I think that's about right. I enjoy doing that as well, so I do have to stop myself and make sure I don't overwork it. Now, all that white around there, obviously it shouldn't be white. It's not snow. So I'm going to have to tint that. The key to this though is to keep it really bright at the same time as tinting it slightly. So let's try a little bit of, I'll tell you what we'll try a bit of Orioline and burnt sienna. Now this might be too orange, too autumnal, not look right, or it might just look like a bit of sunshine. So let's see what we get. I think that works reasonably well. I think what you need to do, if you can, is leave the tiniest hint of white as well. A small enough amount so it doesn't even look white, but it's just a bit of brightness. Well, that's too red. If you get it too red, it'll look like it's on fire or something. Good contrast with the blue sky behind it as well, that warm orangey colour. Down here as well, just picking out those little bits of white. Yeah, okay, so let's stop fiddling about with that and look at what's coming up next. I think we'll take the masking fluid off here. That's gone a bit high. It almost looks like a bit of sea spray the other side, that. But it's not, so let's get a bit of colour. Now this is, you think this would be just, you think you could bung some green in here for grass, but I don't know, it's more brown and a sort of heather colour than anything. So let's just let's maybe get a touch of green with some Oriolin and cobalt blue and some raw sienna. Fairly calmed down olivey green. Just a hint of that, I think. We'll get a bit of purple. Some cobalt blue, rose madder, maybe a touch of light red in that. Yeah, that's a better colour for that. Almost like a heathery colour. And I think also we want a bit of brown. There's a lot of brown there, so let's take some. You could go use burnt umber for this, but I'm going to try and get it all out of the few colours I've started with. So I'm going for burnt sienna, ultramarine blue. But to keep that hint of purple in it, I'm putting rose madder in it as well. Quite a lot of rose madder to influence is needed to influence that. So let's see what happens if we use that. I'll get a number 4 brush. Let's get it started with a number 4. We'll start with a bit of green around there. Maybe a bit of orange as well for a bit of sunlight. Maybe a touch of that Naples yellow, and that's not a bad colour actually, a bit of that Naples yellow and rose madder as well. I've got quite a lot of blue got on there by mistake, so we'll see what I can do with that. And I think maybe later on I'll need a few little grasses on top there as well. Let's try a bit of the purple. Okay, now here, well, let's get rid of that. Here we're going to meet up with that spray again. So we could even put a little touch of blue in that. Let's try that, tiny little touch of blue in there to start the sea theme. Okay, and maybe a touch of purple as well. Okay, now we can bring this right down now to that hard edge of rock. Get a bit more of the green. You can see what I'm doing. There's no hurry with this. I'm building up these colours gradually. That nice purpley colour, I quite like that. I'll let that soften into the wet bit there. Okay, and now let's get put a bit of brown in. Maybe a bit redder, a bit more burnt sienna in it. And that will give us the light catching the top of this bare rock in front of it. Now I think I'm going to get a small brush, a detailer, and I think we'll need a bit of brown around there, because the light's coming from the from the right. So that little bush thing there will be at its darkest at that left hand side. Okay, let's get tiny bit of scumbling about with the very tip of this brush to break up that edge. You can see what I'm doing now if you look at the photograph. You see where I'm getting this idea from for this broken top edge. more brown into there. Yep, okay, so maybe here I'll get a clean number 4 brush, and maybe here we'll add a touch more water. And I get a bit more spray in like that. Again, it's a damp brush that lifts some colour out. Maybe a touch of blue in there as well. Okay, that's some clean water, maybe a touch more blue, a touch of purple. And then soften it in, maybe more clear water. Remember, if you want white, best way to get that is just clear water. I'll take a bit more out. All this has to be done while your colours are still wet, or you won't be able to remove them, won't be able to sort of drink them off with a thirsty, almost dry brush. Well, it's not dry, but it's just damp. Bit more blue there, I think, and maybe a bit of purple there, a bit of cobalt blue and rose madder. Now that'll need to run off into the stonework, but that'll have to come later when that's dried and it's more manageable. Let's take a little bit out there. Okay, so that's all right. Let's look at it. We've got this little thing here. Don't know what it is. It's a structure of some sort. Got a bit of purpley grey. I think it's got some masking fluid on it. It has, yeah. So it's the same principle as that. We need to try and leave that little bit of light to that right hand side of it. It's like a little dome structure. There's a gap in it there and another gap there. Bit of that pinky colour. And that will just need to treat in the same way as the large structure to the right of it, where I just touch into that bit of white left by the where I had the masking fluid, and that just tints that light bit. Now along this top edge here we've got quite a prominent rock. Right across there. And when it gets here, it's quite faint. So I've diluted the grey a bit, and then let's get in with a clean number 4 brush and get that sea spray effect again, that misty effect. Now that bit of plume there, that plume of spray, that's the other side of this, so I don't have to worry about that. I can leave that intact. Maybe a touch more blue and a touch of purple. Yeah, okay. You've got to be patient with this. It's a slow build up. I'm going to darken that edge a little bit, and this one. Furthest away from the light. Got a bit of masking fluid there. Okay, furthest away from the light and darken it a touch. again. Get that sharp edge in. All the way down here there's a sharp edge. And straight away, number 4 brush, clean water, and it's got to be clean. If you stain this that's supposed to be white, we can use a bit of gouache actually, yeah, we can, but the less you have to use the better. So again, it's clean water, keep that soft misty edge. Now we can bring this down here now. Okay, clean water again, bit of lifting out. We'll come back to that over there. And again, I think just here and there, because the spray is reflecting some of the sky colour, so we've got a bit of blue and a little bit of purple. So it's that purpley grey actually. The mixture of cobalt blue, rose madder and burnt sienna. And then here, we can drop this in. Blue and a bit of purple. Plenty of water. Keep it wet with clean water. Yeah, okay. This needs forming into some solid rock next, but I think it might be too early to do that. Although we could try it. I could try it. Because I've got to find a hard edge where it's dry, which I can. Yeah, I think we need to give this a bit of drying time, a bit of thinking time as to what's going to happen over here. If I try to do too much while it's wet, oh, I've splodged a bit there. If I try to do too much while it's wet, I'll lose control of it. So let's get it dry and think about the next step. Okay, so just thinking about what's next. I've almost forgotten actually to put the sea in the background there. You can see a very faint pencil line. So I ought to do that before I could do more work on these rocks, because obviously once those rocks are painted, if I put the sea in then, I'll smudge them. So let's think about what colours I'm going to need for that. I'm running out of space to mix, so we'll get that out of the way, and I'll mix a bit of paint in the lid. And I think we'll go for some colour I had in the sky, cobalt blue and ultramarine blue. But it is greyer and slightly green as well in parts. So let's add a touch of burnt sienna to grey it slightly. Now that looks more like it. And then I'm going to take a bit of ultramarine with just a touch of viridian. Okay, let's try that. And if we look at the sea here, you can see that it's a strong, almost grey blue, like a steel grey in the distance there, and as we get down to here, it gets slightly greener. I'm not going to try to leave white for those waves. I'm going to do that later. Perhaps with a little bit of white gouache. So I can see my pencil line, but only just. I'll give myself a mark for where that comes in at that point there. Okay, so I'm just going to sweep right across there. And then introduce the slightly greenier version around there. And then here, use that misty sort of thing to suggest that plume of spray just the other side of there. Maybe a bit more bluey grey into there, so it doesn't suddenly turn. I need to feather it in so it doesn't suddenly turn green. Okay, now I have smudged the rocks a bit, but that doesn't matter because I'll be able to, they're darker than the sea, so I'll be able to reinstate those. Let's get that dry. Right, let's carry on with the rock work. We do glimpse amongst this one a little bit of lighter colour, so I'm going to put a bit of that pinky colour in. That's the Naples yellow and rose madder. You only get a glimpse of that though. Most of it is this grey colour, and this is where we can get the sharp edge for the top of the rocks. Bit bumpy and uneven as well. And that comes right down to where the sea's rushing in at this point here. And then there's the darker grey. This is the same version, cobalt blue, rose madder and burnt sienna, but it's darker. And we can use it a bit, we can use a bit there. Sharpen that up. A bit there as well. Where we get near the spray, I need to have some water standing by. Okay, so we need a bit of dry brush work on this to get that craggy, rocky effect. Just, if you look at it there, we need to get that, and I can't do that while it's wet. So maybe we need a bit of drying time there. But I can, there's somewhere else I can be working while that is drying. Let's put a little bit of the, what was I going to say, a little bit of that pinky colour over there. That's the Naples yellow and rose madder. Maybe over here a little bit more blue into that. Then a bit of grey into that. That again, that will need some dry brush work to make it look craggy and uneven. After that's dried, so yeah, okay, it's a case now of still giving it a bit more drying time. You've got to build this up gradually or you'll get all smudgy messes where you don't really want them. So let's get that dry and see what the next step is. Okay, we'll develop the sea a little bit here. That colour's about right, but it does look a little bit flat. We want a little bit of white for some waves. But before that, I want to suggest some undulations in the sea by making it not quite so smooth, the colour. So let's take a little bit of the ultramarine blue and burnt sienna. Let's just try to make it look a little bit wavy. It shouldn't look like a mill pond. That's better already. I think we'll try a bit of white as well. I'm going to put a little bit of white on this tape at the top. I wasn't going to do this yet, but while I'm working on this, while I'm working on the sea, a damp brush, and I pick up some white. I always keep that out of the palette, just rub it on the, just deposit a bit on the tape there. And that's just, there's a crashing wave here. Lots of them, there was just tiny marks. There's nothing really too definite. Just little bits of foam in the water that get smaller as they get further away. Yeah, that's all right. Okay, continuing this theme now, we'll get a bit of the darker grey, the cobalt blue, rose madder, and actually I'll get some of the ultramarine, rose madder and burnt sienna. And you can see in this rock formation here, it's quite craggy and uneven, so we'll put some of this in here. Just using the side of the brush to pick up the texture of the paper. And with the light grey, I'll soften a few bits of that in, so it's a little bit hit and miss. Okay, let's put some more dark colour into that, and we can have a little bit of texture there, a little bit of darker colour. Yeah, right, let's continue that theme over here. Trying to leave a little bit of light catching the top where I've got white paper still. And plenty of water there to keep that foam effect. Now the darker colour. Just keeping that little bit of light catching the top edge. Okay, same here, just leave a few light bits, just look like light catching some rugged, rough, uneven rocks. And then here, and this is where I need some stronger colour again, so I'll mix some more ultramarine, burnt sienna and rose madder, a real dark purpley colour. And let's put a bit of, that's too wet, can't do that yet. Okay. Put a bit into here though, a bit more dark into that rock. Give it some texture. Yeah, okay, so I need to look for a bit I can do. And we can, there's a little rock sticking up there. Maybe we can start about here. Yeah, that's okay. I think what I need to do is get that dry, focus on that area for the time being. Okay, so what I'm going to look at now, if we look at this area here, there's this really dark, craggy rock with the spray behind it. I like that, that works well. But before I do that, I need to look at the almost a a mirror image, almost the same shaped bit of rock here, but partly obscured by the spray. That's the tricky bit. So let's try that. I've got some grey, some cobalt blue, rose madder, and a bit of burnt sienna. Not as strong as that really dark one that I just used in there. And it's about here. You don't want to lose any time getting some clean water onto it to keep the spray effect on it. Let's see, there's a glimpse of it here. We just see a bit of it there. Maybe with a bit of blue in it. And now quite a bit of clean water. Keep it nice and loose. All the little splashes that you can see, the little dots of spray and foam, we'll be doing a bit of that with some opaque white, sort of spattered onto it with a toothbrush. Oh, I've spattered the sky. That's a shame. If I can't get that out, we might have to have a flock of gulls there later. Okay, let's just try and get a hard edge across there if I can. Right, let's get some nice clean blue. Cobalt blue. And we'll get a bit of colour into the foam here now. Plenty of water. You only need a touch of blue and then plenty of water. There's also a bit of the purpley grey as well, but quite light, quite soft. And that works well with the cobalt blue amongst the spray. Now, don't let hard edges form. Keep chasing it around with clean water. Okay. Maybe try a bit of white down there. Gradually building it up. I think I quite like the white in there while it's still wet. Yeah. Okay, now this is ideal now for bringing out that quite dark rock there. As soon as I've done this bit. Yeah, we just glimpse the top of that rock there. And then we lose it in the spray again. Again, just clean water, just keep it moving. Try and work rapidly to avoid getting cauliflowers. I know that's easier said than done, but that's how you get the cauliflowers often when you're not quite working fast enough and you start off painting wet in wet. And before long, it's wet on damp. And that's when you get the cauliflowers. Okay, let's just try and define that edge a bit more. Yeah, maybe just a touch more white there. Just with a bit of that white gouache. Yeah, okay. I think I've had a bit of unmixed burnt sienna on my hand there, and I've caught that. So I might need a bit of white to tidy that up because it's stained the paper. So let's drop a bit of white gouache into there. Okay, and a bit more. Yeah, okay, we'll come back to this area now, but we must dry it first. Okay, it's time to take a moment now to see if I can rescue the sky from these spludge. Problem sometimes with dry brushwork is it spits a bit of paint onto your sky or your foreground. Get away with it on the foreground, of course, but not here in the sky. So let's have a look, see if we can. Do you know what? I think I'm going to wash more. I think I'm going to, in an effort to get rid of those, I'm going to wash some blue away, create a big hole in the sky. So I'm not going to do that. It's going to have to be some gulls, which might not be a bad idea anyway. Okay, let's get that out of there. Let's have a look now at this next bit of rock. Now this is quite dark. It's got a bit of warmth in it as well. I can see, looking at that, there's a little hint of brown in it, a bit of warmth. So I've got the ultramarine, burnt sienna and rose madder, and I've put just a touch more burnt sienna in it now. Now this is definitely in front of these here and is stronger in tone, so that's quite important. But I've got good pencil lines to work to. Okay, a bit more colour into that. Bringing it right down to there. Okay, let's get a bit of grey in. Yeah, now there's a big splash coming up here, so let's get some clean water into there. Okay, and then we'll carry on with this, bringing this right down to where it meets some waves. I've got the pencil marks to give me the sharp edges where they occur. And then it's a bit of wavy stuff. It'll help me now if I get the board flat, because it's running downhill into my waves. I don't want it to do that. You see what happens if the brush is too wet as well, you add too much water. So I've got to get that sort of broken, wavy edge here, where the foam hits the rocks. And it's a case of keeping the brush clean and almost dry, but not quite. And it's quite thirsty then, and it lifts the paint out. Look how we get that splashing effect, that spray effect, which I will enhance with some white gouache soon. Let's try a little bit of white gouache now, a little bit splashing there. Along this edge here. And you can soften the white gouache into the white paper. I think the fine spray, that has got to be a bit later on. Like I said, with a toothbrush and a bit of spattering. Okay, take some colour out there. I'm going to put some strong colour in next to it. Get that real contrast. Okay. Lift a little bit out here. It's a case of gradually, not getting impatient, gradually taking the time to build it up. Get some blue in. Okay, some blue and some grey. Okay, so here, if we look at this bit, here, there's a strong white foam there, but look at the shadow into that. And that's the blue and the grey, and that's quite powerful, that's quite dense. And it comes down to a flat edge where the sea rushes in front of it, so let's we can create that with a bit of tissue there, like that. Okay. Right, let's get some more to work into this here. Bring the rocks down here, very craggy. I like that about them, I like the sort of strata in the rocks. Okay, some clean water again. And a bit more blue. And a bit of grey. And plenty of softening with a damp, clean brush. And then this runs off, it's like it's all running back there. Got a bit of that sea colour, a bit of that ultramarine and burnt sienna into there. And then I'll get in a bigger brush, a number 10, and let's get some more of that ultramarine and burnt sienna. And I want a little bit of the greeny grey, sort of aqua blue. That's the ultramarine and viridian. Let's just dampen that with clean water then and come back to it later. Okay, so again, I need a bit of thinking time just to get this corner in right. So let's give it some drying time and see where we are with it. Okay, let's build up some more strong colour for this final rock in this right-hand side. I'm going to take a number 8 brush, and we want more ultramarine. Burnt sienna and rose madder. Probably mix a bit more of the lighter grey. That's the, well, that isn't a grey, it's a sort of, it's like an aubergine colour, that dark, a real dark brown. But this is greyer and it's more cobalt, rose madder and burnt sienna. Okay, so we can now look at this. We can now look at this rock. And that comes down, like it's almost like stepped into the water here. Okay, smaller brush. and then I'll wet it a bit, make it look a little bit foamy. Damp clean brush again. Yeah, I think that's okay. Maybe a touch of white. Let's get some more white gouache. Again, don't put this in your palette, just best to keep it out of there. And I'm going to get a small brush, a number 1 detail, a really good point to it. And let's flick about a bit of splashing, a bit of spray there. Yeah, okay. Not quite happy with that. Softening that in a bit. I think that's a case of I'll get a better effect there with a bit of spattering with the toothbrush. Okay, let's look at this side now. I want to leave this. I want to make this fairly loose, so I don't want to overwork it, and I might leave this side with a bit of it to the viewer's imagination. Let's start with a bit of dry brushwork to suggest a bit of foam around here. I've used that. I've got the sea colour. I've got the ultramarine and burnt sienna that I used on the sea in the background there. Let's have a look at that. And maybe a touch of that greeny, that green blue, that sort of aqua blue as well. Okay, let's get a bit bigger brush. I've got a number 10. And that can rush up to meet that. Okay, let's get some more ultramarine and burnt sienna. And really just try and get a feeling with your brush that you're brushing waves like that, back and forth. A little bit of the greeny blue as well. Let's get a bit more intense colour into there. Not too grey though, that's better. Rake it up. Yeah, I think that's going to be all right for that. Okay, so there's a little bit of work, a little bit of finishing off work to do down here to suggest some rocks partially covered by the spray. I'm going to get my hand all over it though if I try to do that now. So maybe just a touch more of that stronger blue into the foreground there. I'm going to let that dry and see what we need to do to finish it. Okay, one or two little things. Over here first, and then there's this bit more rock formation in amongst that spray and foam there. But I did use a little bit of Oriolin and burnt sienna on there to tint that white bit to look like the sun was catching it, and I think that worked reasonably well. So let's do the same on this little structure here. And maybe a bit of grey to integrate it. Yeah, that's okay. Now there's this plume of spray just the other side of the rocks there that I did by putting a bit of clear water in when I painted the sky. Looking at it now, I wish the sky was bluer around it to give us more contrast, but it is what it is and I've got to work with that. So let's try first of all, I've got a bit of white standing by, but let's try first of all to get that, there's a shadow in the spray of a bit of blue and a bit of grey, so let's get that. And then soften it into the white, and then we put a bit of the grey in as well. Yeah, that's okay. Needs spreading about a bit, and it does need, I think, it needs augmenting with a bit of white. Touch of white like that to the right of it where the light's catching the spray, because the light's coming from the right hand side. There's a little touch of spray there just beyond the blue and the grey. Let's try getting that in, and then softening that in, maybe a touch of grey there as well. Yeah, I think that looks like spray. Maybe a touch more white there. Maybe I could use the white to sort of blend the blue and the grey with the white. Yeah, okay. Come back down to this now. A bit of, not the strongest dark here, but I want a little bit of dark in there. Like a glimpse of a rock amongst the foam. Maybe a touch of dark as well in it. Bit of blue around the bottom. Bit of grey in it. And then with a fine brush, the #1 detailer, we'll bring in a bit of foam as well with some white. Yeah, okay, so more blue and grey into here like that, washing up there. Yeah, probably a glimpse of the grey rock in that. Yeah, I think that's okay. Yeah, really, I think I want to be careful I don't do too much. I think another bit of, I've got a pencil mark there that I'm going to have to make into something. So we'll have a bit of rock there, a bit of grey, a bit of the dark sort of aubergine colour as well, and then a bit of softening to look like some sea spray around it, perhaps a touch of white as well. Okay, now let's look at these little shapes in the sky. I think, as I say, if I try and wash those off, I'm likely to take some of the blue away of the sky and ruin it, and I won't be able to disguise that with a bird. So perhaps just the tiniest mark to suggest a bird. Yeah. I mean, you would see birds here, wouldn't you? It's not like they're not appropriate. I think we should have a couple around this side as well. Yeah, okay. So let's get it dry and decide what, if any, finishing touches that we need. Okay, well, I think I will do a little bit of this spattering to try and get that feeling of spray. If you look at the photo, I'm in two minds as to whether to do it, but if you look at the photo, look at the spray here and like the fine splashes of water. The only problem with it is it's difficult to get it in exactly the place you want it, but we'll give it a try. Before I do that though, I think I just need a few more indications of the roughness of the sea in this left-hand corner. So I'm going to take some more ultramarine and burnt sienna, that sort of steely grey colour, and then some ultramarine and viridian, the sort of aqua blue. Okay, so let's start with a bit of the aqua blue. And you can just use a damp clean brush to soften them in a little bit, leaving a few more defined edges as well. And then this just the grey one. And I think that could do with a bit of white in it to sort of, well, that really plants it down in the foreground. That works well. Probably a little bit of white, because if we look at this, there's quite a bit of foam amongst the water here. So we'll try that while it's damp, and we'll do a bit more when it's dry as well to give us some variety. So a damp brush straight into the white gouache. Let's get the photo in to here so I can see what I'm working on. Yeah, it's not much, it's a few little. You need to get a little bit of shape in them, a little bit of slope. I think they work well while the paper is still damp. Yeah, I think I could easily overwork it. So I'm not going to do any more painting on it apart from to do this splattering. Now when you do this, and I'll demonstrate it in a moment, where you bring a palette knife or any knife across a toothbrush with white gouache on, and you put a few spattery things on. You've probably seen that done. You can't do it while the paper's flat because they tend to hit it and dash off like that, and you don't get the tiny little spots. You get like a little splash. I know it's meant to describe splashes, but they don't look like that. So what you've got to do is get the board upright. So I'm going to take a moment now off camera to get this on an easel, to get it upright, to get in position. We've got to move the camera So you can see what I'm doing, and I'll see you when I've sorted that out. So the effect I'm after now, and it's going to take a lot longer to set it up and get the paint right and on the toothbrush, etc., than it is to actually do it, because it's only a subtle effect. I don't want to find splodges of white all over it. But look at the spray here and here, and on the rocks there, and this, there's a good one there, and here, and it's just tiny little specks of white which are difficult to put in with a brush. So I've got white gouache, and you need to experiment with the consistency of it, because if it's too thick, nothing happens. It doesn't leave the brush. If it's too thin, get too many big splashes. So I'll try that. Got an old toothbrush, and the idea is that you dip the toothbrush in the paint. I'll do that. So I'm going to dip the toothbrush in the white paint. That's not working very well. I'm better actually brushing it onto it. Okay, now the whole idea is that you get your knife and you scrape it towards you, which makes it flick away from you. If you do it the other way, nothing will be happening on here, and then you'll look in the mirror later and you'll have splattered your whole face with the white. So let's look in an area, because this is more effective against a dark background than if it's got the white behind it. You'll hardly see it then, but against the rocks, so it should. Let's have a look. That's the idea there. See how that works? Maybe there as well. After a while, nothing's happening because you've used up the white. But I think I'm fortunate there. I got that just about the right consistency, I think. So let's brush some more on. I know that I've had to take this out of camera shot to brush the paint onto it, because it's quite a narrow view we've got at the moment. But there's no special technique to that. It's just getting a good brushful and rubbing it onto the toothbrush. Then of course you've got to work quickly because gouache dries very quickly. So let's have a look. Other areas where we might have a bit of a splash effect there, I think. Oh, that's a good one. Bit too. That's done it all in one go. That. Okay. Now here, just about here. Let's try a few. Yeah. There maybe. Yeah. So let's just think of somewhere else. Maybe. No, do you know what? I think I've done it. I'm already getting it up here, which I didn't really want to. You can brush any off that you get in the wrong place, but if you get too much, then you can't. It's very difficult to get rid of it. So let's get rid of all this stuff. Get the painting down on the flat. Take the tape off and see what we've got. Okay, time for the big reveal. We'll take the tape away. See what we've got. Okay, well I think that's not a bad day at work. I'm quite pleased with the way that's turned out actually. In fact, one of the things that has really worked out, has really caught me out, is just this tower thing. I think it's not too detailed, but not too much of a silhouette either. We just see enough detail in it, and that always bear in mind, where is the light coming from and how is the light affecting what you're painting. And look how we just catch these edges, and that's echoed in that little shape there. Not exactly the same as the photograph by any means. It's pretty much an interpretation, but really that's what it's all about. And I do think, I was in two minds as to whether to bother doing this splashing thing, because I thought I might get it all in the wrong place and mess it up. But I did find, because it's not something I do very often, I'm slightly out of my comfort zone. But I did find that if you hold the toothbrush quite close, you can actually target where they're going quite well. It's not as haphazard as it looks. So yeah, really enjoyed painting that, and I think you're going to enjoy that as well.